Kia ora koutou. The microphones work, that's always a good start. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Ekant Veer te toko ingoa. My name is Ekant Veer. I'm an associate professor here at the University of Canterbury. And I just want to quickly welcome you all to tonight's Hight Memorial lecture. It was a real honor to be asked to do this lecture, and it's even more of an honor to do it on a topic like this. And when the events team told me, actually, we've got a big crowd out tonight, it kind of 50-50 split me on this sense of joy and this sense of dread. Joy because maybe I'm not alone in this. Maybe there are other people that care about this topic. Maybe there are other people that want to learn more. Maybe there are other people out there who want to see a change happen in our society. And dread because maybe they were looking for answers, and now I have to come up with answers. And so it puts a lot of pressure on a young man. I'm still going to claim young until I turn 40. I'm a young man to come up with answers for a large crowd like this. You might look at it straight away and see Associate Professor of Marketing and go, wait a second, what's a marketer talking about something like this about? And I'll start by saying, I don't believe there is a solution to the problems that we're facing in New Zealand when it comes to mental health. There is no single solution. The only way we're going to be able to solve this is if we can approach this from a multidisciplinary, multifaceted approach. And so even though I'm a filthy marketer, even though we have the reputation associated with all things marketing and we are the bane on society, there are things that we as marketers can contribute back into society, and that's where I've dedicated my career since becoming an academic. Well, Joy reminds me I was her first lecturer and she wasn't even my first student. I'm thinking maybe 10, 15 years now I've been doing this. And so to think of all that time, I've wanted to try and find solutions in society to things that can make society better and use the lens of marketing to help that. This is what we're trying to do. I would straight away want to acknowledge a few people that are in the room. Firstly, the events team who put this event on, who have asked me to come and do this, which is great. Thank you for all the organisation. Let's give them a clap anyway. There are a number of UC Connect lectures that are happening throughout the year, so please do sign up with them for the future lectures. You might not care about this at all, you just want a night out, and this is more fun than the pub. I don't get that, but that's okay. But they have a number of lectures coming up, so please do sign up with them. I also want to acknowledge a number of people in this room who have helped me on this journey. I see a few friendly faces. I'm not going to point at you individually, but people who have joined me on this journey on understanding the context of mental health and marketing mental health and promoting mental health, but also the understanding the context with regards to what solutions are there. What I want to achieve today is not that one singular solution, because as I said, I don't believe there is one singular solution. It's a multifaceted thing. And every time we seem to come up with a solution, two more grow somewhere else. I kind of call this beast like a hydra. And every time we kill one aspect, two more pop up in a different part of the psyche or different part of society, whatever else it might be. So hopefully as we work together, we can find a solution that will help more people. And if out of today you only learn one thing about the tensions associated with mental illness in New Zealand and mental well-being, I'm going to be happy. If also you glean at least one idea that you can take home to your whānau, take home to your workplace, take home to your community, then I'll be extremely happy. So please, let's see if we can work together on this. My plan, and my students, I see a few of them in this room, are probably going to laugh at this. My plan is not to talk too much. My plan is to talk a little, to explain my background, my experiences with this topic, and then allow you to come up with some questions, some comments, some critiques, and then we can learn from this together. So I do want you to come and start thinking of those things, so please write them down, and at the end we'll have plenty of time to chat about that. We have a microphone that I'll get the events team to run around. I don't run, as you can see. And they'll run around and pass the microphone to you, and you'll be able to ask your questions, and we'll be able to keep this for future records as well, because it is being recorded. You will be on YouTube. You're going to go viral. No, you're not. We as a country are awesome. I am ethnically Indian. I am very white, I appreciate that. I am racially Indian, I am ethnically Indian, I'm culturally probably more Pākehā or New Zealander than I like to admit, but that's pretty much where I am. And coming from India and going back to India on a regular basis, I see how difficult things are in other parts of the world, especially back in my homeland. To think of where my grandfather has come from, my grandfather was the first person in his village to learn how to read and write. to just go in 2 generations to me actually teaching people about stuff is quite a huge leap. So we're very fortunate in New Zealand. We are regularly rated one of the happiest countries on earth. It's always the Norwegians that seem to beat us. Do we have any Norwegians in the room? Why is that? I don't know. Oh, kind of semi-Norwegian, okay. We're constantly told by Lonely Planet that we're one of the best places on earth to visit. Wellington was voted as the coolest capital in the world or something like that. Money's changed hands for that. I don't know how that happened. I've been to Wellington. No, Wellington's not. We are told we have an amazing quality of life, and even though our mental health system and our health system seems to be broken, trust me, in other parts of the world, our health system is pretty darn good. We are able to go and get solutions to problems that we have, physical or mental, and it might take some time, but at least those solutions exist, so it's not that bad. We also have one of the highest levels of education. We have one of the most educated populations in the world as well. All these things come together, and suddenly we have this issue as well. We're also rated one of the worst when it comes to suicide. Our male suicide rate in particular is extremely bad compared to our normal, relatable partners that we talk about, the UK, Australia, that sort of thing. I picked Ireland as well because they probably have a very similar sized population to us as well, kind of that agrarian background as well. We have the highest teen suicide rate in the OECD. Now for some of you, this is one of those things you look at and go, I had no idea. And I think that's part of the problem. We don't think about this. We don't talk about this. And there are very many reasons why we do not talk about suicides in New Zealand. One of the reasons that we don't talk about it is because there are fears associated with copycats. As soon as you publish a suicide or you state a suicide publicly, other people think this is something they want to do as well. And there's a very good reason why we don't talk about individual suicides and why people have taken their life. However, the fact that that has filtered down into a point where we do not talk about suicide at all, ever, is causing us problems as well. Over 160,000 people in 2014 and 2015 accessed medical care for mental health in New Zealand. And the rate of growth is reasonably staggering. There's been 60% or so growth amongst Māori and about 33% growth amongst non-Māori. But that doesn't really tell the full story either. This is what the Ministry of Health calls a crude rate of access. So for every 100,000 people, a crude rate, we got about 1,400 people for every 100,000 people accessing mental health care in New Zealand, so 1.4% or so. Now, does anyone know what the rate is for Māori? It's higher, I'll give you that hint, but it's quite a bit higher. We're about 4 times higher than the non-Māori, or the New Zealand average rate, I should say. So even if you took Māori out of this number would drop down. That divide between Māori and non-Māori is growing as well, and we are not solving these problems. They are growing and growing and growing. Now, a good statistician would say that does not tell the full story. That's just how many people are accessing medical care and mental health care, and that could be a good thing, because at least people are standing up and saying, I need help. I need to get the support that I require, and so at least they're opening up and talking about this. That's a very positive way of looking at it. The other positive way, other way of looking at it is even with Māori at about 4.48% of the population or so, that's significantly lower than we would expect, especially with a country that has such problems with suicide, has such problems with other mental health issues that we are seeing in society like addiction and everything else like that. So there's got to be a problem. And this is where I look at that tension between apparently being awesome and then apparently sucking. And then we don't actually know how to fix them. And so what I want to present today, I should warn you, if you've come here for an academic lecture where I sit down and walk you through 20, 30, 40 years of literature, talk about the ontological perspectives associated with my research and everything like that, I'm sorry, you're going to be disappointed. I'm going to try and make this as accessible to as many people as possible, and that means that I won't be covering all the in-depth literature review that's happened, but rather try to examine about 4 or 5 years that I've been working in this area and the sort of observations I've had, and try to pin it down to a couple of particular things that's causing this tension. And the first one is this issue associated with identity, and the second one is this issues associated with control. And as a society, we have grown to this point where Our desire for an identity that has been created as being perfect, pure, enabled, connected, is blocking our ability to access help that we might need. And then secondly, our desire to be in control, to be on top of things, to make sure that all our ducks in a row, whatever sort of cultural slang you want to use, is blocking us from accessing help and services that we need. I don't want to blame the British. Like I said, I am Indian, so I will blame the British. I don't want to blame the British, but this is just one example of the sort of thing that is filtered out into our culture. This idea of keep calm and carry on, or what I like to say, keep calm and keep it to yourself. That sort of mentality of, you know what, if you're struggling, if things are going wrong, that's okay, shut up, all right? That would be great if things are going bad because everyone else has got something bad. The fact that our country is so awesome also makes it very hard, because how dare you complain about how hard your life is, because there's kids in Africa, there's kids in India, there's kids in other parts of the world that are struggling far worse than you, so you've got nothing to complain about. The other idea is that we as a country are so isolated physically from the rest of the world, we've always had to do it on our own, right? That's the whole number 8 wire thing has come out. We've had to find solutions for ourselves, and you've had to be independent, you've had to be self-reliant, and so it comes to a point where people assume that's the way it should be in everyday life as well. Another thing that I've noticed, again as an immigrant to your country, is the whole tall poppy thing, which we all know about. Don't be too good at anything, unless it's rugby, that's fine. But even then, if you're good at rugby, thank your teammates. They're the ones who, okay. That also relates to things that are going wrong as well. Don't be too bad at anything. Don't put your hand up and say, I need help, because you don't want to draw attention to yourself. Remember, fix it yourself. Stiff upper lip. Find a solution. We are isolated. We have to do this ourselves. What does this do? It creates a social norm. This normative effect where we assume we need to be portrayed in the right, societally right manner. And this cartoon summarizes it, I think, well for me. This sort of feeling that many people go through, the idea of waking up, the idea of feeling like death, not wanting to move, putting on their happy suit and then hitting society. This is the reality for hundreds of thousands of people in New Zealand and millions of people across the world, because society has told them this is how you should be. This is how you should act. Because if you walked into society looking like the panel on the left, or even the panel halfway in between, where you express a little bit of who you are, but you cover most of it, then that's not going to fit in. You need to fit in. And even though we like to feel ourselves as strong, independent people, fitting in is still a human requirement. It is something still that we feel. If you don't fit in, if you're ostracized, if you're part of the out-group, if you want to talk sociological talk, all that sort of thing is going to impact your ability to work and operate in society. And that's a huge, huge, devastating thing for many people. This idea of not being able to fit in. What else? We have experiences with mental health and past experiences with talking with people about this, and that impacts the social norms. This is another couple of cartoons. It's a little hard to read. The university, when it comes to technology, isn't fantastic, but sort of some of the panels. I don't think it's healthy for you to have to take medication every day to feel normal. Don't you worry it's changing who you are? This is someone with diabetes. You would never say to someone with diabetes, it's like you're not even trying. The man's bleeding. It's like you're not even trying. Well, lying in bed all day obviously is going to help you. You need to do something else. If I walked out of this room, slipped over, and broke my leg, there would be no issue with an ambulance coming, taking some pain medication, hopefully the really good stuff, getting a cast, having a specialist check me out, making sure I'm well taken care of, maybe hobbling around for a while. People might even celebrate it and sign my cast. People might even say, wow, how awesome it is. I would have no problem with going to physiotherapy afterwards, all this sort of thing, because we accept that medical intervention is necessary when it comes to a physical ailment. However, when you're hit with something as debilitating as anxiety, depression, OCD, PTSD, all these other things, suddenly we don't feel we're in a place where we should be able or need to go and get medical intervention, seek a therapist, find medical or pharmaceutical solutions to this, or anything else like that. The stigma is so strong, and when we do start talking to people, there are enough people out there to say, you shouldn't really be talking about this. Or this is not something I think you should be doing. Or here's a solution, why don't you eat better or do this or that. Now there's some academics at university who are doing some fantastic work with regards to micronutrients, and they're working on ways that your nutrition can improve your mental well-being. Fantastic, and I completely agree with looking at solutions like that. But if you are at a point where you are actually not able to operate on a daily basis, where you have a significant mental health issue, then maybe see a doctor as well, okay? Micronutrients are only going to go so far in my mind. And so we need to find ways that we can absorb all aspects of solutions that are going to benefit us as a society. And then someone will say, well, aren't we solving this? Again, this is from the Ministry of Health. Fantastic marketing from the Ministry of Health, putting out good statistics. 162,000 people have accessed mental health care. They've found an 82% consumer satisfaction rating with that. I don't know what the hell a consumer satisfaction rating is, let alone how someone got 82% in it with the mental health system in New Zealand, but that, it's got a tick there, so it must be right. Like I said, I'm in marketing, we know this stuff. 78% of people access the required care within 3 weeks, 93% within 8 weeks. All these things that are getting better. We are doing better in New Zealand. I will not say we are doing enough. And we're not doing enough because I am a consumer behaviorist. A consumer behaviorist looks at understanding behavior, how people make consumption choices, how people operate, how people act in society, and behavior is key. If you do not have behavior, it's very unlikely there are other things driving it. Sometimes we do stupid stuff. Sometimes we do things without thinking, and our behavior is erratic, and we just go and randomly do stuff. That's fine. Anyone here been bungee jumping? Yeah, that's stupid. Don't do that. I mean, there's no reason for that. But, you know, that's an example of behavior that people do because all their friends are doing or whatever. However, when we see behavior that is pointing one direction, it doesn't matter how many services you've got, how many attitudes, how many consumer satisfaction surveys you've got, if behavior is still increasing in a negative way, then there's something going wrong here as well. We have to find solutions to that. Hugh Norris was the former head of the Mental Health Foundation in New Zealand, and he did a fantastic piece of work about 4 or 5 years ago, looking at men in particular, and the work and the men's perceptions of mental illness and mental health in New Zealand. And one of the statistics that constantly stands out for me is that about 80% he found were willing to be there and support someone if they had a mental health issue. They were willing to be there and be that supporter. However, only about 6 to 8% of men would ever admit to having a mental health issue. And this is where the problem lies. I am not going to be able to help you with the clinical solutions to mental illness. That's why we have doctors. That's why we have psychologists. That's why we have psychiatrists and the like. I cannot help you there. But what I can help you with is trying to bridge that gap. Why are so few people willing to speak up about this? Why are so few people willing to access these services? The services are great, 82%, can't you see? All right? But clearly, something is going wrong. The services aren't being accessed. Advertising doesn't change culture. I am going to be indebted to John Kerwin and the work that he did those years ago to start the conversation in a more macro scale, to start talking about this much more wide scale and saying, this is something we need to talk about. But if you stop there, if the government stops there, if society stops there, we're never going to get it down to the individual level. Starting wide, starting macro, starting the conversation is a great place to be, but we need to start taking it further and bring it into people's lives. One of the biggest problems that we found with, when we did an analysis of JK's advertising campaign, is that a lot of men in particular were able to say, well, that's fine. He's an All Black. You know what? He could say anything, and he would still be a god in my eyes. Yeah. I'm nothing. I'm nobody. And so if I admitted that, I'm less than nothing. I'm less than nobody. That tension when it comes to identity kicking in again. In my mind, and this is the perspective I'm taking, culture sits at the heart of societal and ideological change. If we build a culture of stiff upper lip, keep calm and shut up, guess what's going to happen? If we teach our kids this, and we focus on developing a culture where, you know what, it's okay to have issues, just keep them to yourself. It's okay to be good, just not too good, all that sort of thing. That filters down into our culture. And if we start reinforcing that culture, it's going to be very difficult to break it. So in my mind, what we need is a cultural shift, and not just a small development, but a revolution in how we talk about mental health in particular. And that will help shift the ideology, the culture, the acceptance of this to a point that hopefully we can change 6 to 8% willing to ask for help. Let's aim for 15%, but hopefully 100% of people, when they see a problem in their life, they're willing to go for it. Again, like if I slipped on my butt out there, broke my leg, I don't think I'm going to go, you know what, I really don't want to cause a fuss. It's a broken leg, lots of people have it. I know in India there are many people with broken legs. Maybe if they can handle it, maybe I can. No, just get my broken leg fixed. If I'm suffering from depression, maybe I should get my depression fixed. This is the sort of thing we're talking about. So why are things not getting better? And these are the sort of things I want to sort of very quickly talk about, but really rush through. Like I said, this is 4 or 5 years worth of work, immersing myself not just with advocacy groups and people who are working on the front line with this, but also with advocates, so counselors, mental health counselors, but also spending time with people who are suffering from mental health themselves, talking about their experiences and what they're going through. I will admit right now that most of the work I've been doing has been with men, because that's the area where I'm seeing the dire need with regards to the masculinity and the identity there. But that's not to say that the issues associated with women are not necessary and not worth further investigation as well. But if I use examples from masculinity and men, I apologize. It's not because I'm a horrible sexist person. It's just where my knowledge has come from, okay? But I'll be happy to give ideas with that. If you do want to talk more about women and mental health, can I encourage you to go talk to the All Right campaign? There's a wonderful worker there called Anna, who works with mothers, and the work that she does with regards to mental health is fantastic, and I love the work she does, and she's taught me a lot, which is great. But the sort of things that I want to talk about and try and summarize are these here. So the idea of social norms, past experiences, stigma, identity, and control. And I've tried to summarize it in a pretty little model, because I'm an academic, and that's what we do, we simplify things. We've got these things called social norms, and this is not new. We know what social norms are. They are the things that make us think, this is normal, this is what society expects from me. And from the observations we've made and the work we've done, the stigma associated with mental illness and the past experiences we've had, whether it's with mental illness services, like going to the doctor, or whether it's just talking about this with our friends, dictate and manifest themselves in those social norms. I was talking with one young man who said every time someone encourages him for being brave and opening up and talking about his mental illness, he feels a little bit better, he feels good. But every time he also reverts back to the sort of words his dad used to say, which is, shut up, stop crying, toughen up, boy, you're never going to get anywhere. All these past experiences. So even though 1,000 times he will hear positivity, it always reverts back to that one negativity. And that one negativity reinforces the stigma over and over again. Our experiences, our past experiences, will reinforce the stigma, and it will also impact what we think are the social norms. One of the biggest problems with this as well is that it's not rational. Humans are not rational. Please stop looking at theories that say humans are rational. I am a human, I am irrational. You are all humans, trust me, I'm sure you've done irrational things before as well. So just assuming that we do irrational things is not true. We do stupid things, like focus on the 1 out of every 10,000 times that someone says something awful about us, and that reinforces itself inside us, and it hurts, and it keeps going on, and everyone does this, okay? So what happens with those social norms? Well, social norms manifest themselves into behaviors. And this is where I like to keep my work. And they're behaviors that bolster a person's well-being, or they're behaviors that bolster their identity. And sometimes, many times, especially when it comes to mental illness in New Zealand, those things are mutually exclusive. It is very difficult to find times where I can feel more like a man and get better mental well-being. A lot of men feel they cannot do that. They feel very, very disconnected. That's not true, but the perception is there. And I'll give you some ideas of things that do work in that sense. But especially when the stigma is strong and mental well-being is seen as such a negative thing, then people manifest themselves into practices and behaviors that are either bolster their well-being or their identity. And some of those practices are constructive and some of them are destructive. And finding out that balance between the constructive and the destructive practices is where we need to be. And I'm going to put up a list of practices here that are by no means a complete or thorough list of practices, and I really don't want to put a value judgment on some are more productive and some are more destructive, but there's not one that you're going to see a couple there like, ooh, that's surely more destructive than the other. Don't shoot me if I've got the order wrong. This is a summary. But the idea of seeing a professional therapist is a constructive practice. Finding support networks, social engagement, all very constructive. Addiction, not as constructive. But we know that's how it manifests itself. When you don't know what to do, sometimes alcohol becomes a very easy way to escape. When you don't know what to do, sometimes you fall back on drugs. It doesn't have to be non-prescription or illicit drugs, it could be prescription drugs. Self-harm, violence, suicide, all these things start becoming very destructive practices. I'm going to put out there and put a value statement. Suicide is not a productive, constructive practice. For many people, it is the most destructive thing they will ever do. But for many people also, it is the only solution to that tension. I cannot talk to anyone. I cannot find a solution to this. I feel there is no hope left in front of me. And so suicide seems to be the only way that they can express their feelings and the manifestation of their identity. I spoke to one guy who was a suicide survivor, and he kind of summarized it as best he could for me. But he said, being a man means being in control, being powerful. A man means you're a provider. You're powerful, you're strong, and in control. Mental illness tells me I'm chaotic, I'm useless, and I'm a burden on society. So if I told people that I had depression, I'm also telling people I'm not a man. And I went backwards and forwards, he said, in his head, between I'm not a man, I need help, I'm not a man. And so the most masculine thing he could think of was to take back control, and that was attempt suicide. It was the thing that he wanted to try and do because he felt that way he was in complete control of what he was doing. Now for us, we look at that and go, that's irrational, dude. See a doctor. That's not how mental illness works. We're talking about something that instantly messes with your head. That is the nature of it. And so irrationality becomes far more powerful than rationality. And so even though suicide seems like a really weird thing to do, it makes complete sense when someone is in that sort of cycle. You don't want it to happen. And again, I'm not going to come up with a single solution that's going to solve this, but it helps us understand where we're coming from. I want to talk a few slides now, the last 3 or 4 slides, look at that, I'm well on time, fantastic, about some things that I think are small things we can do as a society to try and make things better. And I'll go through each of these. I want to give a shout out to the All Right campaign and the work that they're doing in Canterbury in particular. I've been on their advisory board for a number of years now and I love the work they're doing. But they have the 5 ways to wellbeing, and if you work within the mental health advocacy area, you will know about the 5 ways to wellbeing, so giving and spending time with people. Really good practical tips. I want to talk about some different things though. There are plenty of avenues out there that you can exploit if you want to learn more, but these are 4 in particular that I want to look at. The work we have completed showed that when we focus on everyone rather than those that are really, really sick, things get better. Don't just focus on people that are in desperate need. Don't just focus on people who are right at the end of their tether, who are right at the end of all their livelihoods, everything is falling apart. If you get there, we're in a bit of trouble. Mental well-being is something that everyone can benefit from. Everyone can benefit from understanding a little bit more about controlling their stress, their sleeping patterns, their anger, their tension, all these other things, which are small micro manifestations of mental well-being. So promoting a culture where open and honest discussion about mental well-being is common, but it's not glorified, and that's the balance. And we'll talk about this in a second in the next slide, about glorification. But an understanding of what mental well-being is. If I talk to someone right now about mental well-being or mental illness, they would probably straight away go to some of the more dire ones, like bipolar, depression, anxiety. Actually, just feeling stressed is a form of mental well-being. How stressed are you? Now, as a society, one of the societal norms is if I go up to someone and say, hey, how's work? And they said, it's really good, I love it. I'm so chilled. That's a really weird thing. You have to say, I'm busy. Oh, look, it's so busy at work. Oh, look, it's so busy, I'm so stressed. That's what we expect because we've glorified stress. What a stupid thing to do. glorify stress. We're meant to be this land at the end of the earth that has a great time. And we glorify stress and being busy. It doesn't seem to make much sense to me, but it's kind of what society has done. I like to answer people honestly when they ask me, how are you? And typically if I said, how are you? People say, oh, great, man. Yeah, fine, good. Now I kind of go, I'm about to say great, and then I'll pause and say, you know what, I want to give you an honest answer. I want to think about that for a second. And some people don't like that, because they just want me to say fine. Give me a second, Kerry. Yeah, about a 6 out of 10, I'd say, Jane. 6 out of 10. I had a bit of a nap this afternoon. Nana naps should be up here, by the way. That should be number 5. Everyone should take a nap in the afternoon. 3 o'clock, everyone stop for half an hour. Yep. All right, go back to your employer, take that one back. That's amazing. Okay. But short temper, microaggressions, just things that are, behaviors that are slightly out of the ordinary. Those functions that seem to be, whoa, that's a little bit weird. That's not typical or typified of your character. Some people are always angry, but when they get angrier, maybe we can see it. But even anger is a manifestation of something else that maybe needs to be dealt with. And it could be as simple as understanding how that person has been brought up, how that person has been taught to control anger, or whatever else it might be. Language is vital, in my mind. What we found from a lot of the people we've spoken to is that the language is so stigmatized that it just reinforces how they feel. We are not clinicians. Most people are not clinicians. Can I get a hand? Anyone here an actual medical professional, a proper doctor? Okay, there's a couple of people. Good. I'm glad we have proper doctors here. My mum calls me a PhD, which means phony doctor. My older brother's a surgeon. He's an MD. That means money doctor. You gotta love the Indian upbringing. But most people aren't clinicians. I was at a conference recently over in LA, and they were talking about the suicide completion rate. I'm like, the completion rate? Holy shit. I'm like, what an awfully dehumanizing way of talking about suicide. But it's very common when you're talking about public health, very common when you're talking about medical health and things like that. I remember when I was doing my PhD looking through the psychology literature, and my PhD was on looking at exercise and eating, and they would compare obese people with normals. I'm like, come on, piss off. Okay, but normals was the word that they would use, and overweight and obese were not normal. And like, it is just the language that's used, but that language is hugely stigmatizing. It is hugely disempowering, and we've got to find language that is humanizing, empowering, especially when we start translating it back into people. And I'm not talking to the clinicians here, I'm talking to everyone here in society. So language can stigmatize and it can glorify on the other side. And I hate how our society has started to glorify some aspects of mental illness as well, to the point that the words have lost all meaning. So appropriate language to destigmatize is important, especially if we can use it to bolster identity. So some of the examples that we have used with regards to interventions are things like, I'm struggling, rather than I need help. In particular for men, makes a lot of sense, because men don't like to ask for help, because that means you are useless. But everyone struggles. Everyone struggles picking up a box, everyone struggles doing anything. So it's still a value judgment there. You're still not doing great, but it doesn't mean you've given up. You're struggling at the moment. And so when men were able to say, I'm struggling, and people actually knew that was referring directly to how they were going with their mental well-being, that made a much bigger influence rather than saying, actually, mate, I am really feeling bad. I am at the end of my tether. My mental well-being is really bad, blah, blah, blah. The sort of things that we need to hear if you're a psychologist in order to properly diagnose someone, but it's not the sort of language people use in everyday life. Needing support rather than needing rescue. That the idea that using struggling means I don't need you to take everything. I just need to lean on someone for a while. And then once I've lent on you a little bit, hopefully I'm going to be able to get back. We stopped using the word mentally well or mental well-being or mental welfare completely in the interventions we use, especially with men these days. We use mentally fit, because fitness is something that everyone can understand. You need to be physically fit to do everything. If I need to walk, I need to have a certain level of fitness. Now, if I get unfit, guess what happens? I go for a walk, I go for a run, and I'm going to feel pain. The same way that everyone can be mentally fit. And then if you're not mentally fit, guess what happens? When you hit stress, and everyone will hit stress, When you hit stress, you're going to have the impacts that stress are going to manifest themselves in behaviors that are far more significant than if you weren't mentally fit. So we start talking about how's your mental fitness. You know? How much time have you put into training? How much time have you put into yourself? And that's been much more successful with the men we've spoken to than just talking about how's your mental well-being? How's your mental welfare? How's your mental illness these days? A little bit stigmatized. Now on the contrary side, on the secondary side, language that is glorifying, I think also needs to change in our society. I'm OCD, I'm so OCD, oh my God, I'm so OCD. No, you're not. OCD is debilitating. It is something that really, really hurts people. And then when we completely flippantly use it in this manner, it almost takes away all power it has. My personal bugbear at the moment is how quickly people say that they're triggered. Triggered, when you're talking about a PTSD experience, is a hugely, hugely painful experience. And just because you're upset, and just because someone's not agreed with you, and just because you've not got your way, does not mean you've been triggered. It means that you're upset. And it's okay to be upset. We all get upset. I'm upset. A lot. But it's how it is. But I've not been triggered into a state that I cannot escape from without serious medical intervention, which is kind of where triggered comes from. So we have to be careful with the words we use. My team committed suicide. I heard this on the radio just last week when on Talkback. I love Talkback. What I like to do in my spare time, I like to go and take photos. I like to take astrophotography in particular. So I'll be out in the mountains at 2 a.m. sometimes taking photos, and then driving back home. I love listening to Talkback radio because late night Talkback radio, that's when the real quality comes out. If you ever feel less of a human, go and listen to Talkback radio, because sometimes the things people say, you're like, oh, I like to play How Racist Are You? Just oh, there it is. Anyway, but I heard this and said my team committed suicide, and it hurts. Because suicide isn't something we can flippantly use like that. It means something, it matters. It says something about a person and a society when we use it so flippantly. Now, part of me will say, and the linguists will say, that if we are able to talk about these words and say these words, we're maybe able to take away some of the power associated with it, some of the stigma associated with it. Unfortunately, if we take away too much of it, then when people actually feel this way, when they actually feel depressed, when they actually have this issue with OCD, and they try to express it, people say, nah, everyone's got OCD. You know, I've got OCD. I have to wash my hands after going to the toilet. I'm so OCD. No, that's hygiene, all right? When we talk too much about these things in a flippant way, it makes it very difficult for people who really are struggling with these issues to honestly, openly, authentically talk about it, and people honestly, authentically, and openly take them seriously. So we have to be careful with the language we use. The third one is micro-communities of support. I love macro attention. It is great, it is wonderful, but it is not a form of support. Social media is not your therapy session. Social media provides you with a great amount of attention. It's great to get attention, okay? But it is not the same as finding a micro-community of support. And what I mean by a micro-community of support is a small group of people who know you, a small group of people who are aware of your behavior, and a small group of people who will notice, okay? Now, there are many people out there who feel they don't have anyone like this. They don't feel that they have anyone they can turn to. Trust me, if you don't think anyone cares, stop paying rent for a couple of weeks. Someone will care, okay? Don't do that, talk to someone, okay? If we can create a society where there are micro-communities of support, where each person can look out for one another, and it might only be 2 people in your family, it might be 5 people at work, it might be a small group of people who just notice one another and are willing to talk to one another and say, how are things? And actually honestly want to know how things are, then we can create more of a peer-to-peer community, peer-to-peer society, where these sorts of things, when they do manifest themselves in behaviors that seem out of the ordinary, we can not only pick up on them, but we can strongly and authentically encourage that person to find the help that they want, and their identity to not be so entangled in that idea that I need help, that they're able to escape from it. So, people who care and notice changes in behavior are hugely important, and you don't find that on social media. The only time that's found on social media, I think for me, is when I was talking with my colleague Helen in the UK, and she sent me an email because I hadn't been on Facebook for about a week, and she was worried about me. I said, usually I see you all over Facebook. What's happening? Helen, I'm in China. There's no Facebook. You know, I'm okay. And that made me felt really good. I'm like, oh, thank you, Helen. She's my micro community of support. Or she just wanted me to put up something sarcastic or a photo or something. I'm not sure. But she was worried about me. But if you can find someone who can do that in our everyday life, then you become much more powerful. Because that person then is able to be that person you can lean on. Now, I'm not talking about you having a therapy session. You having a therapy group. It's just people. It's just people who can look out for each other. One example that I found extremely powerful was an example of a rugby team in small town rural New Zealand. And this rugby team was exclusively made up of people, men with mental health issues. The rule of the rugby team is you must have a mental health issue going into that team. Okay? The second rule is no one must talk about their mental health issues. Not because it's stigmatized, not because we don't want to know, but because that's not the purpose of the team. The purpose of the team is to play rugby. And the purpose of the team is to get together every Saturday for a game, every Thursday for a practice, and just get out and do something. And you know what? If Jimmy wasn't there, people noticed. If Johnny wasn't there, people noticed. Okay? And it became this micro community of support where they didn't sit down and talk about their feelings. They didn't talk about how each one other was, but they played rugby in this social league, and they just enjoyed their time together. And it became that support network that became so powerful for them that even though they were getting much better with their mental illness, they don't want to care. No, maybe my mental illness is coming back. I still want to play, you know. No, but it was a way that they can continue to encourage one another and feel connected within a community of support that became really powerful. If I could get that in my workplace, awesome. And I do have that in my workplace. I can name 3 or 4 men right now who look out for me, and I can name 4 or 5 more people beyond those men who can look out for me as well, and I'm very, very blessed for that. So we need to find those things. And the last thing I want to talk about is we need to expect more from the leaders. And those leaders don't necessarily have to be the government. I think they should be taking a role, but our leaders could be in our families, the leaders in our whānau, the leaders in our community, leaders at your workplace, wherever. The longer we start thinking this is something we have to do on our own, and I'm going to be worried if I do something wrong, the worse it's going to be. We need to have leaders who are able to step up and say, even though I have this issue, I'm going to support you. Even though you have this issue, I'm going to support you. And then the more people that can speak up about this, make this something that's worthwhile, destigmatize it, and disentangle again that's issues of identity and mental illness, the more people are going to start going, yeah, this is okay. We need more JKs in society. Leaders in society who are willing to say, yes, this is something I support and something I want to get behind, and I think it's something that we should talk more about. I want to give a very quick plug to It Matters. I'm not in any way involved with It Matters. I've had a couple of conversations with them, but I'm not on the organizing team, so there's no vested interest there. But I'll show you quickly what It Matters does. They're part of Platform Trust. So if anyone knows Platform Trust, it's a conglomerate and it's kind of like a hub of networks up in Wellington. They put together this idea for this election called It Matters. And It Matters basically says, we think mental health matters enough that it should be an election issue. And they've gone and put down how many MPs or candidates from each party say it matters. So this is how many people, how many candidates currently from the different parties have said, yes, I think mental health should be an election issue. And they've even, just for good academic, they've cited the tweets. These are the things that the different MPs have said. Okay? They also, you can click through and you can see the policies from the different parties. Now, this is not complete. I have no doubt in my mind that there are more MPs out there and more candidates out there who believe mental health matters, but they're just not publicly declaring it right now. As a society, we can ask them to declare it. And you can ask them because on this site, which I love, you can click on parties and politicians, you can find your ward, and it'll even give you their email address, it can give you their Twitter account, their Facebook account, and it will even draft you an email that you can send them, okay? Find your local electorate. Who should we pick on? But you will be able to find it, you'll even be able to find your party, and it's a way that you can start saying to your MPs and your candidates, this matters to me, doesn't matter to you, and call them out. One of the things I've learned over my many years of being a human being is that people hate it when they're called out, especially if they're trying to run for public office or some position where they're going to be under public scrutiny. Okay? They hate it not because it's an awful thing to do, they hate it because they're forced to take a position on something. And you know what? I think it's time we force some of our leaders to take a position on this. So I would encourage you to go onto It Matters and not spam every MP out there. Don't be trolls, okay? Just a couple every day. Just make sure that at least the people in your electorate know that it matters to you, it matters to them, and we're going to be sick of this idea of this being so stigmatized we can't talk about it in society. We want to have an open public conversation about this. That is all I really want to talk about. Now, I'm putting these numbers up there not because I believe anybody in this room needs it, but because it is something that we feel that should be important as part of the work we do when it comes to mental illness. I encourage you to go to the Mental Health Foundation's website. They have a full list of services, both in New Zealand and the regions and everything else like that, that you can access. So please do access those services. I would like to open it up for questions at this time. Yes, sir. Let me pass this to you.
Thank you. I am a nurse. We're not a doctor, I'm a nurse. And I see a good proportion of our patients that come through the hospital where I work are on antidepressant medication. So there is a substantial proportion of the population. I think what you're saying there is very clear that it's still an enormously bad thing for somebody to admit, and it would appear to me, from what I've seen, I've never kept a graph of this, it seems that men are much, much worse at putting their hand up than women are. So the figures that show that women are more likely to suffer from depression is probably outweighed completely by the fact that men are much more likely to never admit it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to use a very crude example now. Apparently, there are double the number of women that suffer from IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, than men. In reality, most doctors I spoke to about this said actually it's probably 50-50, just guys think it's okay to fall. And women don't really care. Women are a bit more worried about this, so they go and seek help about something like that. With mental illness, I think you probably find a similar sort of effect in that when something is going wrong, and when we know that, and again, these are horrible sexist generalizations, but we know that women are much better at expressing their emotions. They're much more attuned with regards to their emotional understanding, and they can self-understand when something is not quite right, and they're more willing to go and find a solution to it. While men, when they start, they don't really, men, again, sexist, they don't understand sometimes their emotions. They don't understand those changes in the first place, let alone when things are going bad. And as a result, what ends up happening is that when things do go bad, you get back to this, I'm a man, I'm meant to be in control, I'm meant to be the provider, and if I admit this, then I have to also admit that I'm less of a man. And I think that's a huge, huge part, like you were talking about. Huge thanks to the work you do as a mental health nurse. I know a couple of mental health nurses. Just a nurse in general. Thank you for your work in nursing in general, but the mental health nurses out there do a fantastic job, and it's a very thankless job that many nurses do, whether they're mental health or not. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I completely agree that I think from the work we've been doing, that masculinity, that identity, and the admittance of mental health is a huge barrier.
Just adding on a little bit, I don't want to make it sound like I'm taking over the whole show.
No, please.
Are men a bigger proportion of the suicides?
Yes. Men, apparently it's very equal, but the completion rate amongst men is much higher, if we have to put it that way. And then there's all sorts of horrible mythology about it. Oh, when men want to kill themselves, they know how to get a job done. All this sort of rubbish, while women are just doing it for attention. That's bullshit. Anyone who is that desperate that they're even attempting this needs help. Okay, so we need to start thinking about that. But yes, in New Zealand, men have a higher rate for sure than women. The actual physical numbers I can't tell you off the top of my head. So just behind you.
doing some research as well, which you know about.
Yes. Thank you for your work with the All Right campaign and everything.
Total privilege. One of the things that I've noticed when talking about mental health with people is that their first experience of mental health is typically a bad experience. So the first time they become aware of mental health in their lifetime is when somebody, one of their key support people, is actually mentally unwell, has that broken leg, or where they start to feel unwell themselves. And one of the things that strikes me is that at school we all do physical education. What about mental education or mental, and the fact that actually if we can approach it as a holistic thing, that if you have physical health you actually have mental health and they're actually one and the same thing.
Yep.
It's all about balance.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. So the comment was, why don't we start approaching mental education in schools as well as just physical education, the same way we do PE? One of the problems is, I hated PE, God, but I completely agree. If we're going to change this, and you want to change this over long term, then we need to starting young. Start with the mokapuna. Start with the people who are going to be the leaders of the future. But it also means us taking responsibility to say, this matters enough that we want you to do this. I also feel this is something that we as parents and we as a society, whether you have kids yourself or you are just quasi-parents to someone else's kids, and everyone can be that, we're able to start feeding into their lives and start being that person that they can turn to if they feel that they can, if they do need to talk to someone. What we are finding, and again, this is a generalization, what we're finding, especially with the Māori population, the Pacifica population, is that very rarely do they talk to their parents. Parents are cool, but auntie is who they go to. There's auntie. Auntie is the person who they turn to, not necessarily the straight up line manager, which is kind of how it is sometimes, but they can talk to auntie, and auntie is always willing to listen. But when auntie gets sick, when auntie breaks her leg in the mental sense, that hits them hard. Because it's like, well, now if auntie can't handle it, how the hell am I ever going to handle it? So we've got to find out ways that we can all be aunties. We can all be that person that someone can turn to, but also in an authentic way where we can say, even though I'm listening to you and I'm going to be your support person, one day I'm going to need you to support me as well. And it's okay. It's okay for me to be supported by my kids. It's okay for you to be supported by someone younger. And try and talk about this not as I'm invincible. No, it's just right now I've got my stuff together. But in a couple of weeks' time, a couple of years' time, a couple of days' time, it could be the other way around. But I would like to see, and I think we are seeing this, if you compare my education to my kids' education, empathy, education, emotional upbringing is a much bigger part. My teachers actually ask my kids how they're feeling. My teachers just used to ask me why I'm not working. I kind of tell the story that they banned corporal punishment halfway through my education, and you were only allowed to hit kids if you had a letter from your parents. I was the only kid that my parents wrote a letter for. So this is the only way he learned. My biology teacher used to wave it in front of me. Straighten up, boy. I've got the letter from your mum. So that's not how it is these days. We do spend more time, but I agree. And again, if we do have primary school teachers or high school teachers here, you'll know it is really hard to squeeze more into a curriculum. How do we squeeze this into every day rather than a subject though? I'm one of these people, I do not believe that we should have a course on ethics at university. I do not believe courses on ethics should exist. I think ethics should be brought into every single class that we teach. The same way I don't think we necessarily need to have a course or a 3-day seminar on emotional education or mental health well-being. It should be something that maybe should become so much part of our life and our education that we don't even think about it. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I suppose the angle also that I was sort of trying to put across is the fact that why do we separate mental and physical health?
Oh no, I completely agree. I hate that when I'm feeling really low, that I go for a run and it works. I hate that. Because it kind of makes me think maybe I should exercise more, and I hate exercise. I really hate being proven wrong, but exercise really does help, and I agree. I think it should be. We've got a gentleman up here with your hand up. Did you want to ask a question, sir? Yell it out and I'll repeat the question.
I'd actually like to just respond to the lady over here at our school over at Shirley Primary. we're actually starting to address the question with the board and with the staff of a mental wellness, health and safety plan. We talk about health and safety, about whether you've identified the tripping hazards, have you identified the broken legs, all that stuff. As a web developer who develops websites, we get asked to put contact information on the page. We get asked to put a privacy policy on the page. What about what our mental health policy is within your organisation?
Yep.
Mike King has been doing a lot of talking about this whole space. I'm sure everyone's already across that. So I actually threw out on his Facebook page, who's got a mental health and safety plan, and how they address maintaining it and what they do about it in their businesses on a website. The silence was deafening.
Yep. It's absolutely true. So the first comment, if you didn't catch it, the gentleman works here at Shirley Primary, and they are doing far more with.
Sorry, no, I don't work at Shirley Primary.
Sorry, you're involved with it.
I'm a parent of a child.
Parent of a child at Shirley Primary, and they do take a much stronger look at mental well-being than maybe many of us understand or appreciate. And the idea is, should we have mental health policies with regards to our health and safety policies like we do with, if you work with any organisation that has humans involved, and that's most of us, you have to have these RAMs that we put together, and so the risk assessment matrices, oh God. Someone's getting paid a lot to go and assess those things, I'm sure. But they are useful to preventing trips, hazards, that sort of thing. Why don't we have something with regards to mental health policy? And you know what? Before the It Matters group started their campaign, I think there was maybe one political party that had a policy or an actual position on mental health. Now they've had a couple more come out and say, well, here are formal policies that we have as a result of this, so thanks for calling us out on that, so I appreciate that. Ma'am, you had your hand up. Yep. So the question is, if you have a colleague or a friend and you think they might need help, what is the most effective way? The most effective thing you can do is stand by them. If you do not have a long-term relationship with that person and you're kind of just saying, I spotted something differently, whatever, if you go up to them and say, hey, do you think you need to see a therapist? Guess what? They're going to shut down on you very, very quickly. Okay? But you can go to them and say, how are things? How are you going? I had someone actually email me today when he heard a radio interview I did, and he said the question he asks is, how's your brain? The same way he asks people, how's your legs, how's your arms, whatever, he asks, how's your brain? That's the language that they've used. The words that we use in the communities we've been working in interventions, it said, are you struggling at the moment? How's your struggle going? Are you struggling more, struggling less? That sort of thing. Finding language that works. And then asking them to be authentic. And again, it's one of those things, one of my colleagues, and I kind of hate it, he's like, how are you doing, Ekant? I'm like, I'm doing really well, mate. Thanks for asking. He says, no, how are you really doing? He said, I'm honestly doing well. I'm fine right now. Leave me alone. I heard the story about one of the mental health advocates who's in Kaikoura at the moment, and he went onto one of the farms, and apparently the farmer said, if one more person asks me how I'm doing, I'm going to shoot them. Now, for me, that sounds like a microaggression. Short temper, red flags. No, but at the same time, when you keep reiterating that sort of thing, okay, it can get to the point where it gets really bad. At the same time, I think what we need to do is start establishing, before we even think that someone's doing not so great, start establishing these micro-communities of support where you can support each other. Again, I'm not a clinician, so I can't give you the 100% answer. If we've got a nurse or a doctor or someone who can help this lady, that would be fantastic. I think what we need to start doing is just at least start having that conversation with people who we aren't worried about. Just so that we can know that if at a point that we are worried about them, that we can actually have an open and honest conversation about it. Gavin had his hand up, and then go back here, yes.
Just looking at the student demographic, this stigma of failure.
Sorry, speak up, mate.
The stigma of doing, failure,
Yeah.
doing well in school, high school, university, the amount of stress it puts on us. What's your view? This is just my experience as well, and other people I've talked to.
Yeah, I mean, for some reason as a university, it's almost like a rite of passage to make students suffer. To put a massive amount of stress on them, to see if they come out on the other end okay. And it sucks. I hate it. It shouldn't happen. I mean, I've stopped exams in my third year classes. I don't see the point in exams. I would much rather assess them throughout the semester. Not only because exams aren't really real life, there's going to be no point where your employer's going to sit you down and say, right, for 2 hours you're going to write this out. I could test you on anything. It doesn't really happen. I'd much rather you spend a couple of hours to think about it and then a couple of weeks to put down your words on paper and then do some research behind it. That for me seems a bit more authentic. But for some reason as a university and educational institutes put this on you, and then your parents tell you this is the best time in your life. You know, make the most of it. If you feel like you're failing already, and then your parents are saying this is going to be the best time in your life, you're like, oh God. And then you go on Facebook or Snapchat and everyone's having an awesome time and you're the one that feels like a loser. You know what? It all builds up. And for some reason, we accept this as a norm, and it's not normal. I hate exams, and do I have any of my students who have done my first year class? I like to make my exams fun. I put jokes in my exams, I put song lyrics in my exams just so that they can have a song stuck in their head during the exam. I've had students email me saying, why the hell did you do that? That was awful. Was it Frozen I did for you?
You said you put Let It Go.
Let It Go. And the abuse I got from people was hilarious. But that's because the university demanded I have an exam for my big first year class, and so it was a way of assessing it in that manner. But I agree with you. I don't think we should ever put any person, student or non-student, under a situation where failure meant that they were nothing. Failure is part of life. We should all be okay with failing. I was the awful parent that when I had the parent-teacher interview with my eldest daughter's teacher at the start of this year, she said, so what goals do you have for your daughter this year? I said, you know what, I'd like her to fail. Because she's so good at everything. I want to take it down and pay it. No. I want her to know what it's like to overcome something that she did not do well at. Because you know what, I don't think she's being stretched. And she avoids things that stretch her too much. And that's not what life is. I have seen far too many students coming into university who have never failed. And you know what? They hit a stumbling block and they don't know how to cope. What happens? They go into the workforce and you're going to fail. You're going to fail regularly. Don't nod too hard, Emma, all right? Don't look at me like, I thought I did all right, you know? But you're gonna fail. And we're going to have to learn to overcome that failure and not feel like a failure. Our behaviors do not dictate who we are, and this comes back to it. So just because you failed doesn't necessarily mean you are a failure, okay? Maybe if you keep failing, you never actually get over that stumbling block, maybe that thing's not for you, okay? But try something every day, every week, that pushes you so hard that you might fail, and you do it anyway. Because you know what? That's when you know how good you really are. Man, very quickly, and then we'll come here, and then I think we should be done because, you know, dinner and everything.
I just wanted to talk about the fact that one of the things that we tend to do is we tend to ask once, how are you? Or I've noticed this about your behaviour. And quite often what we do get is a rejection. And I think it's really important that we don't just stop and only ask once, but ask again. Choose another moment, another time, another place with that person, and ask them if you really are concerned about somebody. So it's a process. And I think the other thing is that I've heard that story before about the farmer somewhere in mid-Canterbury, and what concerns me is about the farmer next door. And there's a big assumption that we make, which is, right, we've been rejected, and so therefore we go, oh, better not visit any more farmers. And actually, the farmer next door may have a very different view on the situation.
That was my first reaction when I heard that story, is that that's part of the problem. Is that there are very vocal people who say, I'm fine, piss off, don't bother me again. But you know what, that person who isn't fine will say, I'm fine, don't bother me again, piss off, but please come back tomorrow. I'd really like it if you came back tomorrow. Okay? And we have to keep repeating it. Now, and I didn't talk about it here, but it leads very well onto that. One of the paradoxes I saw, especially within the farming community, the rural New Zealand community, is that rural New Zealand community has a very tight community. One of the strongest senses of community you will find anywhere in the world. And that is both its greatest strength and its greatest weakness. Because the strength is that you have a strong community, people feel close and knit together, and they feel like they're tight and everything else. But to be honest, if anybody feels like, you know what, I need support, I need to admit I've got a mental health issue, or I need to admit, they're so afraid to admit that in case they lose part of that community, in case they feel kicked out of that community, in case they feel like they don't have that. And if you don't have your community, then you have nothing when you're so tight-knit. So finding communities of support, not just micro-communities, but micro-communities of support, so important. Ma'am, I'm really sorry, we'll ask this gentleman, he had his hand up, and then I think we should finish because I'm getting evil looks. Feel free to leave. Look, I'm a lecturer. Students do this all the time. I don't mind. No, not you, David. Shut up. He's got the microphone.
Thank you for the exciting lecture. It's a very important topic. Well, first, I wanted to say it's not only asking, it's also being a good listener.
Yeah, good
that gets
listener.
people talking. And if you're a sympathetic listener, then people will talk to you and open up to you eventually. And the second thing I wanted to say, what do you think about the purpose and the meaning? And I'm referring to work of Viktor Frankl as well. I think that's really important for the well-being to have this strong purpose in your life that can help you to overcome anything really.
I'm really bad at this, I'll admit straight away. I like to fix problems. If someone comes to me with a problem, here's 3 or 4 solutions, solve it. Sometimes they just want me to listen. And I'm learning that. I have 2 daughters, one of them's nearly a teenager. I'm learning to listen. I'm still not good at it, but I'm still learning to listen to say, all right, that's fine. I'm not going to beat that person up, I promise, honey. That's fine. I'm just going to listen to you. And if the problem doesn't solve itself, I'm just going to listen, okay? It's very hard, but being a good listener is hugely important. The purpose and the meaning of work, I think, is hugely important, especially for men. There's still a very tight identity associated with many men with regards to what they do. It's one of those things, especially in Pākehā culture, where you talk to someone, you shake their hand, and then usually one of the first things you ask them is, so what do you do for a living? You know? Well, and if you said, oh, I'm unemployed, oh, that's not a good thing to say. No, well, then you have no purpose, you know? People say, oh, I'm in between contracts at the moment. I think I'm evaluating my options. No, it's okay to be unemployed, but the problem is, as a society, we've said if you don't have a job, you have no identity. You don't have a purpose, you don't have any identity. And so when we don't find identity and purpose, what we end up doing is feeling like we're less of a person. Again, men, happens with women as well, but a lot of the time with men, especially when we've acculturated into a society that makes men and work so tight together. One of the things we worked with the farming community in particular was looking at those micro achievements they made. So a lot of them felt like, I cannot become a whole man, I cannot do this, I'm useless. So we got them to diarize everything that they did that day. Not good or bad, just everything they did that day. And then they would review that at the end of the day as a reflection. Because again, men are really bad at reflection. They're really good at saying, I suck, I'm no good, but they're really bad at saying, actually, I fixed that, I did that, that calf was a really hard one to get out, and I managed to do that. I didn't yell at my kids when they came home when they were little shits, I actually did. Finding time for reflection, purpose, really does help. David, I'm going to let you have the last word because I was a bit mean to you, I apologize. So David, do you want to have the last word, and then we will... Good, so that's the end.
As a marketeer, do you think people in New Zealand should do more to educate men that they recognize that they have mental health issues? Do they have a bad week, bad month, or is that a start of mental health?
Yeah, I think there are many ways we can educate other people in society with regards to mental health issues, especially with regards to men. I think the first thing we can start doing, if in lieu of a formal education program, in lieu of a government policy, is we can start modeling. We can start saying, this is what healthy looks like. This is what healthy language is. This is what healthy behaviors are. You know what? I am not going to allow this to go by without being at least addressed. One of the things, again, I'm marketers, so I look at a lot of ads. One of the ads I liked was the shouty Sam. I don't know if you remember it when it comes to alcohol. It says, "Oh, you coming to the party tonight, Sam? Yeah, but just leave your mates at home." Shouty Sam, hits on everyone's wife, Sam. You know, almost gets arrested, Sam. That sort of thing. It gave people a script. It gave people something to say to start that conversation. And we need to start finding those scripts where we can start modeling and saying, you know what? Happy Ekant's not there. Angry Ekant's here. Okay? Happy Ekant's not here. Sad Ekant's here. We've got to find some way where we can have these conversations, we can start these scripts in a way that is going to be authentic, it's going to be taken seriously, and it's going to connect with the person, because this is part of the problem as well. So again, we could wait forever for someone to solve this problem for us, but I think the best thing we can do is start solving the problem for ourselves, start talking with one another, looking out for one another, and if you ask someone how they are, be prepared for the authentic answer, and if they don't give you an authentic answer, you know it's not an authentic answer, ask again and again, and say, you know what, I'm going to keep asking you because I really want to know, and I really do care. Now I'm probably preaching to the choir here. I think most of you probably do care, either that you just wanted a crazy night out at a lecture, but hopefully you do care enough to do that. I want to say a very quick thank you again for coming along. I know this conversation will carry on, and I'm sure it will carry on. Please do keep having these conversations. Thank you again. Thank you.